Wonderful. Welcome back to session 2. It's my pleasure to introduce Burcu Demiray. She is a lifespan developmental psychologist and senior researcher at the Department of Psychology at the University of Zürich. She examines cognitive aging, such as memory, and their relation to well-being across different age groups in the real world by using methods such as smartphone sensing. She's passionate about understanding and promoting healthy aging.
Thank you, Irene, for the introduction, and thank you for having me. I'm very happy to talk about sounds of healthy aging today. I hope you can all see my screen. So yeah, I'll be talking about assessing everyday cognitive activity from real-life audio data. So as most of you probably know, the World Health Organization has initiated a global collaboration, which is the decade of healthy aging between 2020 and 2030, to bring together governments, scientists, and the private sector to improve the lives of seniors. So the WHO is promoting a paradigm shift in aging research, a shift from a disease-focused model to a dynamic, contextualized, person-focused model of healthy aging. This model emphasizes person-environment interactions. So if we quickly go over the terms here, you can see that this is the intrinsic capacity, which means it's the composite of all the physical and mental capacities of an individual, such as their personality traits or history of diseases. Environments, so the person is in an environment or in different environments, these are all the factors in the outside world that form the context of an individual's life. So the model emphasizes the interplay of the intrinsic capacity, environments, and their interactions in producing functional ability. Functional ability enables people to be and to do what they value, basically. And healthy aging is the process of maintaining this functional ability that leads to well-being in old age. One important domain of functional ability is to engage in social and cognitive activities in everyday life. So active participation in such activities has been found to be associated with the maintenance of cognitive abilities and psychological well-being, as well as with a reduced risk of developing cognitive decline or, for example, dementia. So cognitive aging research has been based on behavioral measures of cognitive performance in the lab. It has been dominated by these measures. And such work has shown a general age-related decline in cognitive functions such as working memory or attention. However, as proposed by the WHO, not only cognitive abilities, but also real-life cognitive activities are an essential part of understanding healthy aging. Furthermore, cognitive performance in lab tests does not always correspond to real-life cognitive activity performance. So it's extremely important to observe what older adults are actually doing in everyday life. And there's also a growing interest from healthcare sectors and regulatory authorities in using real-world evidence to make healthcare decisions. So what we do is we embrace this model, we take person-environment interactions seriously, and we use a naturalistic observation method in the real world to examine seniors' cognitive activities. We use the electronically activated recorder, namely the ear. This is a naturalistic observation method that unobtrusively samples ambient sounds and speech from users' daily lives. So it is basically a portable audio recorder that records brief snippets of sound. So currently it is an app for commercial smartphones, and participants wear the phone throughout the day, usually around their waistline, while going about their days, unaware when the phone is actually recording. And in a typical ear study, each sound file is only 30 seconds long, and we collect about 4 sound files per hour in order to protect participants' privacy. So I'm gonna play this to give you an idea.
That's why I thought it was okay.
I think it's okay.
No, I didn't see Mom do it.
It's the law.
I didn't see Mom do it. I said, Mom, should I set the cruise control at 80 all the way home? She's like, that's fine. And if she says anything different, it's a lie. because you don't ever test my memory. My memory is perfect.
Yeah, so this is an example from an American data set that we have. So at the end of the day, we usually end up with about 80 sound files per person. And what we do is we convert the sampled raw audio data into quantitative psychological information. For that, trained research assistants listen to all of the ear recordings. They transcribe study participants' speech, and we code them for objective behavioral aspects. We focus on two major categories of coding. So we look at first social environment. So we try to understand where the participant is, what they are doing. Are they watching TV, for example, or are they in what type of interaction are they in? Are they in a dyadic interaction or a crowded group, for example? So we try to understand the social context. And then we also listen to their conversations. And we look at things like the topic of the conversation or how they produce language. We look at, for example, word choice, such as are they talking more about more using positive emotion words or negative emotion words, and so on. And previous ear studies have shown that people spend between 32 and 75% of their waking time in social interactions. They spend 1/5 of their waking time in spontaneous conversation. And most previous ear studies have been conducted in the domain of social and clinical psychology. In our research, we have used the ear method for the first time to examine cognition and for the first time with older adults. So what we do is we examine natural conversations as an indicator of cognitive activities, such as autobiographical memory and language complexity. We explore the associations between such cognitive activities and psychological well-being in order to understand healthy aging. So I will present some of our work on autobiographical memory and language complexity, and then I will briefly touch upon other lines of research to give you an idea of the other cool things that we're doing. So autobiographical memory is basically the ability to recall our personal past, our past experiences. Remembering and talking about our personal past is a very natural and frequent activity in everyday life. And neuroscientists emphasize that this memory system that allows us to recall the past also allows us to imagine possible events in our future. So this system is especially relevant for aging, as older adults have a much longer past and a much narrower future than younger adults. And the way they recall their past and the way they perceive their future is highly associated with their well-being. And obviously, memory decline is a big part of cognitive aging research. So in this line of, in our line of work here, we, for the first time, examined how and why young versus older adults talk about their personal past versus their personal future in the real world. And we also examined associations with well-being. So in this set of studies, we had two major samples, one from the US and one from Switzerland. The American sample was a bit special. We had 53 breast cancer patients and their healthy spouses. They were on average middle-aged. In Switzerland, we had 61 healthy young adults and 48 healthy older adults with a mean age of 70. So in the US, we did ear recording for 2 days. We did recording for 18 hours per day. And in Switzerland, we extended to 4 days, again, 18 hours per day, 50 seconds per sound file here and 30 seconds in Switzerland. And at the end, we ended up with 146 minutes of audio data per person from the US and 130 minutes of audio data per person in Switzerland. So what we did was we listened to all of the sound files. We listened to the speech, we transcribed the speech, and then coded the speech in terms of many categories. But here I'm just going to talk about these three that are relevant. So we first coded whether the participant was talking about their personal past. This could be a specific event or an extended event or a repeated event from their past. We coded for whether they were talking about their personal future, so anything that could or that will not happen in their future. And we also looked at mood to tap onto psychological well-being, and we coded for laughing behavior, singing, crying, and arguing in the sound files. So we first looked at the how much question, so prevalence. How much do people talk about their past versus their future? This was very interesting to us because we had no idea what the results would look like. And we ended up finding a retrospective bias in talking, meaning individuals talked much more about their past than their future. And this holds for breast cancer patients, their healthy spouses, the healthy young and old in Switzerland. As you can see, they all talk much more about their past than their future, actually at least twice as much. This was very interesting to see because it seems like a universal phenomenon, maybe. And it also is in contrast with an existing finding in the thinking literature, which is the prospective bias. So there's a prospective bias in thinking behavior, which means individuals think much more about their future than their past. Of course, this is based on self-report data because it's about thinking. People report in daily life that they think more about their future. So we were very curious about why we found the exact opposite in social interactions. So the why question, why do people talk more about their past but think more about their future? We wanted to look at this question from a functional approach because we were curious about the functions of memory, the purpose of remembering the past. And again, there's a literature on this coming from the thinking literature. So the current studies on thinking behavior show that people recall their past for two major functions, social functions and directive functions. Social functions are when you recall your past, for example, to develop a new relationship with someone, to get to know them, or to maintain and enhance current relationships. So this could be trying to create a conversation with someone, creating intimacy and bonding, or teaching them something. You know, I did that mistake, you should be careful, don't do it. Things like this, giving advice. And the directive functions are for directing and guiding your current and future behavior, such as planning. So remembering your past to plan your future, or to set goals, or to make decisions. And again, this literature is dominated by self-report data. And what we did was we took these information and applied them to social interactions and real-world speech data. And what we found was the social functions, such as conversation building, intimacy creating with someone, or teaching something to someone, they were highly associated with past-oriented conversations. So participants were talking about the past to serve these functions, to teach something, to have a nice conversation with someone. In contrast, the directive functions were associated with future-related speech. So when participants were talking about the future, they wanted to plan something, they wanted to solve a problem, they wanted to make a decision about something. So again, there was this contrast between past and future. And when we look at well-being, we found that all participants laughed 2.17 times more while talking about their past than their future. So again, this was these findings were all consistent across young and older adults. So let's quickly discuss these findings. Again, prospective bias in thinking versus retrospective bias in talking. Why could this be? We tried to find an explanation showing that individuals seem to use their past for social functions, but their future for directive purposes in social interactions. So laughters are obviously shared with others, and people might be using their past as a resource to laugh, to feel good about themselves while socializing and bonding with others in everyday life. Whereas directive functions are more likely to occur in private settings. So people tend to plan or make decisions in their minds, and they're not likely to laugh while doing these things. And we found interesting results related to aging. So older adults do not live in the past, in contrast to some stereotypes. So they talk about their past and future as much as young people do. And they do it for the exact same purposes. And they do it with laughter in equal amounts. And so this means both young and older adults seem to be using their personal past as a resource to bond with other people. So this ends the memory part, and I want to quickly move on to language complexity. I mean vocabulary richness and grammatical complexity specifically. So language complexity is a very powerful predictor of one's cognitive ability. For example, Ronald Reagan was diagnosed with Alzheimer's 6 years after he left the office. And scientists examined samples of his speech in the last years of his service and found significant traces of decline in language complexity actually over time, and suspected that he had the disease much earlier. So language complexity is influenced by the decline in cognitive abilities that comes with age. For example, word finding capacity while talking decreases with age, as well as working memory capacity. And these declines are associated with declines in both vocabulary richness and grammatical complexity. However, the literature has two main limitations, because most findings come from lab tasks, and the role of context has not been sufficiently examined. So what we did was we examined young and older adults' language complexity for the first time in everyday life using real-life speech. We examined the role of context by focusing on who they were talking to. So we looked at their conversation partners as one aspect of context. We believe that they would modify their vocabulary and grammar accordingly. What we found was, again, we compared young and older adults. We found that young adults used richer vocabulary than older adults. And this was consistent across significant other family member, friends, strangers, and this replicated lab results. But familiarity of the conversation partner actually helped everyone. As you can see, these familiar conversation partners, they all end up with higher vocabulary richness than strangers. And good news for aging is that older adults produced equally complex grammar as young people while talking with their partner. We found that participants produced less rich vocabulary and simpler grammar with children, with grandkids, for example. And older adults did this even more. So this suggests that older adults actively modified their language according to the needs of the conversation partner and according to their familiarity level with the conversation partner. In some conversational contexts may compensate for the negative influence of cognitive aging on language use. And older adults can maintain their language complexity depending on their context and with the support of certain contextual factors. So it is not only decline as shown by lab studies. So I very quickly showed you autobiographical memory and language complexity results, and it's good news that older people can function quite well in daily life, in contrast to their maybe lower lab test scores. This is good news. So we really have to study seniors in everyday life, because they seem to be functioning quite well with some compensation strategies, support from maybe memory aids, or support from their environments, people around them, families. The problem with audio data is that it's a wonderful way of listening to people's daily lives, but the thing is, we're dealing with big data. Currently in our lab, we have about more than 500,000 sound files. It is extremely time-consuming and very demanding to pre-process these data, to manually listen to them or manually code them. Therefore, my lab is trying to find ways of automatizing all of these procedures. And we've been working with computer scientists, data scientists, in order to automatically code some of the data. What we did was we first started with our transcripts, because we have these manually transcribed speech data. We said, okay, let's look at these transcripts and see if we can automatically code them, at least, because coding takes so much time with at least 2 coders looking at inter-rater reliability. And I have good news. Looking at all of our coding categories, we could quite accurately code them using machine learning algorithms and it seems to be working. So speech samples can be automatically coded with acceptable accuracy rates. And this worked for both contextual variables, such as activity location, but also psychological variables like mood. So this is great news, but this approach still requires verbatim transcripts, which requires human transcribers. Achieving sufficient accuracy in automatic speech-to-text transcription, so automatic transcription, is extremely difficult for real-life data, because real-life data are very noisy. There's a lot of background noise. Sometimes 4 people are talking at the same time. It's currently close to impossible, but I'm hopeful for the future. And this is also especially difficult with dialects such as Swiss German, unfortunately. But yeah, we are going to wait for changes to happen in this area. And the next thing we can do to save some time and energy is, can we automatically detect speech in these sound files? Because when we listen to all of the sound files, we find that maximum 30% of them include participant speech. So the remaining 70%, if we're not interested in train sounds or birds singing, then it's irrelevant, and it's kind of a waste of time if we want to focus on conversations only. So how do we detect those 30% immediately? Luckily, we found a way of doing this. Again, this is real life data, so it's very difficult to achieve this, but we found a way, and we can. It takes the time for labeling takes 81% less than manual analyses. So at least we can save some time by just focusing on those 30% maximum, and just maybe manually transcribing those, and then using automatic NLP, natural language processing, to automatically code the data. So conclusions. Okay, cognitive real-life activities are important domains of functional ability for healthy aging. And we ran the first-year studies to extract cognitive activities from real-life speech. And we showed that this can be done. And we also did the first-year studies with older adults. EAR seems to be an efficient method to use with older adults. It works actually perfectly well. And this method can involve those seniors in research who would otherwise be excluded from research, those who are maybe intimidated by technology, or unable to use a smartphone, or who are unable to do self-report or questionnaires. And we can also observe clinical samples with this method. Depression patients, dementia or Alzheimer's disease patients. It can just, we can do passive recording of sounds from their environments, from their lives. And the ear could be, especially I think for language complexity, could be used in everyday life, maybe as a diagnostic tool in the future. So we could track people over time, look at their language complexity over time in real life, and try to catch an early onset of Alzheimer's dementia, for example, or Alzheimer's disease. And studying older adults in everyday life also shows us that cognitive aging is not only about decline. So when we look at these person-environment interactions, when we run these micro-longitudinal studies, we can look at within-person variation over time in everyday life, varying across different contexts. And we can see that older adults are quite good at modifying their activities or behaviors according to the needs of the context, and they have so much experience, they have learned so much on how to engage with life, that they have their strategies, maybe compensation strategies, that will help them to function perfectly fine in everyday life. So finally, in collaboration with computer scientists, we can automatize the processing of ear data, which will hopefully allow us to work more efficiently in the future with these big data coming from real life to understand healthy aging, and hopefully in the future also start promoting it. Yeah, so I think that's it from my side. Thank you very much for your attention.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your talk.
Should I stop sharing? So should I stop sharing, or?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
There are a few questions. Maybe we can take 2 or 3, and then the rest we probably better transfer to the panel discussion. One is fascinating. Did he compute correlations between planning future and evocation of the past?
Correlation between? Sorry?
Planning future and evocation of the past.
Planning future and?
Remembering the past.
In conversations. So, yes, there's a correlation there. So it's so people who talk more about the past also talk more about the future. That's the question, right? Yes, that's a moderate correlation, not a super strong one, but yes, it exists. And we also know from research that remembering the past and recall pre-living the future or imagining the future, they're highly associated cognitive abilities anyway, and they also show very similar characteristics. For example, depressed individuals who have overgeneralized or negative memories, they also are unable to imagine the future in a positive way, or they also cannot imagine specific events in the future, but tend to imagine the future in an overgeneralized way. So yes, there are correlations between past and future thinking and talking. Yeah. Thank you.
Then there is another one. Do you encode prosodic markers as well, in addition to language contents?
What exactly do they mean?
Like intonation, for example.
No. I mean, yes, we are trying to get at that, trying to code directly audio signal or the speech of the person, the voice, the tone, for example. We've done some work on this. Currently, it doesn't look very promising, unfortunately, because, like I said, in real life data, it's very noisy data. So it's not lab data where person is reading a text or speaking naturally in a quiet room. Because of all of these, of the quality of the sound files, unfortunately, we are not able to get too much data from the audio signal yet. We tried some sentiment analyses, for example, tried to understand the mood of the person from their voice in everyday life. Unfortunately, not looking very promising yet. Yeah.
Brilliant, perfect. Maybe we drop off here and then we meet just again in our panel session. But before we drop off here, I want to let you know as well that there also will be a Young Advocate networking event at the end of this panel session. So if you'd like to join, please sign up. And I'll see you in a minute.
Thank you. Bye.